Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hi everyone, and welcome to a brand new Clear to Send podcast episode. I'm here this week with Roel. Hi Roel, how are you?
Hey everybody, I'm doing well here in San Diego this time, so on vacation with the family, but wanted to get a recording in there.
Yes, and this one is very interesting. It's about programming. It's entitled Automate or Die. And to talk about this subject, we have Jake Snyder with us this week. Hi Jake, how are you doing?
Good, how are you doing, Francois?
Very good, very good. So, we've been talking about, automation in the networking field in general, and it's slowly coming into the Wi-Fi field. So we felt like we wanted to talk about it this week, talk about, why we should learn some programming as a Wi-Fi engineer, how we could get started, what to do initially if we're interested in it, and how is it going to be important for our jobs. And then we also wanted to talk about different use case we could have in our day jobs. Sounds good?
Yeah, sounds great. It's my life right now. So,
well, we're glad we have you on the show then. Well, why don't you introduce yourself actually to everybody who don't know who you are?
Sure. My name's Jake Snyder, and I'm a wireless engineer at a reseller and network VAR here in Boise, Idaho called CompuNet. And I've been there for about 9 years, and I've been doing wireless there for 7.5. And, I came from a little bit of a software development background before I rebooted my career and started networking. So it's kind of like coming home to do the programmability stuff, with networking. It's kind of like bringing my last career and my new career together. And, I have various certs, and they're, I'm really proud. I have my CCIE and my CWNE, but, I do maintain a lot of certs for the day job. So, that's me.
Perfect. And you also happen to organize a Python class at the last WLPC conference. Do you want to talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah. So Ryan Adzema and myself did a 3-day Python boot camp at the WLPC 2018 in Phoenix. And, the goal of that class was to teach Python to wireless engineers. It was Python for wireless engineers. And, we tried to do it in a way that all of the examples are examples that a wireless engineer might run into in their daily life. Configuring wireless equipment, SSHing into devices, parsing data out of something like an Ekahau survey file, all those types of things that we start, and they were pieces of stuff that I do at my day job for improvements to what we do. So that was kind of the premise of the class, and then we also did a 3-hour deep dive. It was more like a 4-hour deep dive, but which is. Unfortunately, I don't think you can teach Python in 3 hours. I just don't think it's possible. But the goal there was more give them the tools where they could learn, and then show them some use cases where you could sit down and use it practically for real world applications for wireless.
Yes, and I myself attended the deep dive, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later on during this episode, and I can give the audience my feedback. So the big question is, why should we learn to program as a Wi-Fi engineer? Which part of our work will this influence? The designing section, the troubleshooting, the monitoring section. What can you say about that?
I think all of them. So for me, it's about solving problems, and we're blessed in wireless that we have lots and lots of problems to go after. So if your pain point is monitoring, there's lots of libraries and things that you can do in Python to monitor systems and pull data and correlate data. If your issue is Design. Well, I don't know that design specifically we can automate. A lot of people try, but I think we can do things where we can support that.
I was thinking around the lines of reporting was what Francois said. You can probably automate a lot of the reporting parts once you have a design. I guess that's one part with Ekahau.
So I'll talk a little bit about a use case I had at my day job, at CompuNet. So we had a project that, due to no fault of our own, was, customer recorded our bid incorrectly. And they came back and said, "Oh, well, your bid is $150K less than what you actually intended. What do you want to do?" And the sales VP and myself sat down, and it's like, well, either we eat the cost and we just do the right thing, or we ask him to go rebid it and hope we still win. And I was like, I don't really like those options. What else can we do? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, maybe we could automate our way out of this. And so we sat down, the wireless team, my coworker Scott and I, it was his project, and we said, how can we reduce what it takes for us to do this? And we took our process, we turned it upside down. We found opportunities to automate and reduce the labor that we had to put in to deliver a solution. And then we implemented that for this project, and we came out ahead of the game on it. And so part of that was we changed how we did it. We used Python to extract data from our Ekahau design files. We used APIs to pre-configure all the equipment in a product called APIC EM. This was a Cisco deployment. And then wrote some scripts to do some power checking and switch capability checking, those types of things. But at the end of the day, we no longer had to log in and touch. Like every night, cable guys are going and up. And normally we would go every night at 4:00 and we'd spend an hour and configure and name and do all that stuff for all the APs that got deployed that day. And we do that every day for, 2 months. And so all this automation saved us from having to do that. We also worked on automating some things and some process changes to ensure accuracy. We leveraged interns. And so, interns aren't always the most reliable, but, we streamlined the process such that it was a lot harder for them to make mistakes. And we used the automation piece to, just save us time with the new process in order to ensure that accuracy. So we end up coming out ahead, and it's something we're actually doing moving forward as a service offering where we leverage that to make installs go quicker and easier. So.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Cause, when you do this, do you tell the client we're going to automate a lot of these processes, or is it more of a, hey, we're going to come in and you just do it, but you do it in such a efficient way that you're not wasting any time because there's no mistakes. You've automated the task that can be automated, and then you actually complete the project ahead of time or ahead of their expectations.
For us, and we're a reseller, it's about reducing costs and keeping us competitive, and making sure we were finding that our old process and our old method, we were spending a lot of time in rework. So the cable installer, I love cable installers. I have some great ones, but we sometimes contract with some not so great ones, and so they don't write the serial numbers of where they put it. You couldn't read it, or they wrote them in the wrong spot. There were a lot of places where we had opportunities for things to fail. And then we would spend a bunch of time trying to figure out what went wrong or where that AP actually ended up. And so for us, it's like, where did this AP go? And it's like, well, it's up, but I don't know where. And so after we did this project last year, I came back and said, okay, there's other opportunities here for us to save time. And so we're constantly looking at what we're doing and how we can improve it. So like right now I'm finishing up the code to where we do a design and we deliver it and we have it installed and deployed. And then when we go back and we do our validation survey, I actually will take the design file and the survey file, and I, programmatically compare the two. So the survey file thought this AP was in this spot.
Man.
And in the design file, I thought the AP was in this spot. And now I'm comparing them to see how close they are. And if they're more than a percentage, if it's more than 10 feet, I start adjusting the percentage of confidence that it's in the right place. And so just, they go out, they survey, they come back, they run the script against the file, and it says, whoa, AP 12 and 14 are flagged that we suspect they're in the wrong place, or they've been swapped, or, we have 4 or 5 APs that are all not in the right place. We need someone to go look. And so for that, it saves us sitting there staring at an Ekahau file, trying to figure out, okay, where did they really put that? And then did we catch it? We looked at it. Did all the APs end up in the right spot? Sometimes if the APs next to each other get swapped, it's hard to tell with just straight RF. So this gives us a way to quickly analyze whether the cabling team or the install team did their job correctly, and whether we need to go fix it first before we start doing other things.
So when you do your validation survey, you make sure that you record the exact location of the AP, right?
No. So we're just doing it based off what Ekahau thinks. Okay. One of the things we try to do is take a reading directly under the AP.
Yeah.
Because Ekahau will move it to the spot where it thinks it's the closest. So I try to get them to stand on the AP and take a reading so that Ekahau makes a really good guess that it's right there.
Man, Ekahau should hire you to do some job. Yeah. You could sell this code to Ekahau.
I got in a huge knockdown drag out fight with my father when I graduated high school because I wanted to go be an art major and he wanted me to be a software developer. Okay. So
it's kind of like an art too.
Yeah, it is like an art, I think, because you're taking a language and you're doing something with it. And even as you describe what you just did, I'm trying to figure out how you do that, right? You're comparing your design to a validation survey, but when you're looking at the comparison, is that like an output that's just put on a document, or that overlays on a map
what I do is I just do a mathematical comparison. So in the Ekahau file, they actually list the X and Y coordinates for every AP. And then there's also a scale involved because it's in pixels.
Yeah.
And so there's so many pixels per feet. And we just do a quick conversion of, take where I designed it, I find the XY coordinates and use the same map for the validation survey. And so I take the XY coordinates, I compare them, and then convert the distance between the two to either feet or meters, depending on where you live. And if it's above a certain threshold, for us, it's about 10 feet. If it's not if it's within 10 feet of where I predicted, or where the design said, I say, that's cool. I'm pretty sure it's in the right spot. If it's outside of 10 feet, the further you get, I start basically weighing that my confidence is less and less that it's in the right spot. And if it's below a certain confidence threshold, I say, we need to check it. So that's how I do that. And in Python, there's some magic, because the Ekahau file is a zip file. So we extract it. That's a process. The actual data file is an XML document. So we parse that into data that we then read in and compare in, it's just a script. It's not anything super fancy. So, it strips it open, both files open, compares the XYs, names up, because, at least for most of our manufacturers, they advertise the AP name. If they don't, then we actually can pull the MAC address out of the file and those types of things.
Okay. Yeah. And that part is one of the parts you can automate, because that process is always kind of the same when you're going to pull out that data and then do a comparison. You can script that out pretty easily, I would assume. Now, I don't know much programming, but this is why we have you on the show.
It's pretty easy. We're just taking and comparing numbers. There's a little bit of math, and my math skills from college are not what they were back then. So I Google it and look for the formula and then figure it out. Or I find a Python library, like one that I'm working on right now is an AP in a coverage area in Ekahau. And it's like, and I use this example in the boot camp, because, my friend Blake Croney wrote this very nice, Python script to determine that. and it was probably 30, 40 lines of code. And I was like, yeah, I'm lazy. I just imported this library and it's 4 lines of code. And so, it's one of those things where trying to figure out the math, is not my strength. And I think that's the part where with networking where Python is a skill. It's like writing configs on an iOS switch or configuring a Palo Alto firewall. It's a skill. And if you know how it works, you can do a lot of cool things with it. Just like I can put my firewall in transparent mode or routed mode. I can do all these, cool inspection things. Same thing with Python. It's just a different syntax and language and a different set of tools. And trying to figure out how to put those pieces together. And it's like, well, I'm not really great at math or, figuring all these things out. It's like, but somebody else, that's their expertise. And so I go get the Python library that they wrote that said, I'm the math guy. I can figure all this out. And I just said, great, you do the math. I'm going to plug in my stuff and get the results out.
Yeah. You're able to find the resource that allows you to actually get the job done, since you don't have to come up with all the math portions of that. and it makes me think like, I should have paid more attention to math back in the day, because there was a time where you sit in class and you go, when am I going to use this knowledge?
Yeah.
Well, it's come to bite me now.
Me too, honestly. But the other piece is just breaking down challenges into tasks. And like, we've been, one of the things that got both Ryan and I kind of excited at WLPC was listening to Eric talk about the Apple diagnostic logs. Because there's all this great data in there. There's location data, there's RSSI and roaming events, and it's all this data that us as wireless engineers are like, ooh, that's so awesome. And so, I've been spending some time writing some parsing modules in Python to parse that cool stuff. And it's like, so that I can get better debugs, from an iPhone when I'm doing surveys. And I'm starting to see more and more people deploying like iPhones or iPod touches in warehouses for barcode scanners. And I'm like, figuring out why they do what they do isn't always easy. So now I've got another tool in my toolkit to go, well, let's take a test phone, put the debug profile on it, go test it and recreate what's going on, and then go take the logs back, parse it out, and have it tell me, what it thinks is going on. So,
yeah, I think that's a really great idea, especially when they start adding those diagnostic logs. And I think it took a while to get to that point, even with iOS, because once people really started using Apple devices in enterprise, we just didn't have the resources to see what was going on from that device's perspective.
Yeah, it's been a couple years, and the log file is kind of ambiguous. There isn't like, you can put this diagnostic profile on, but Apple doesn't talk anywhere about what's in it or what some of these things mean. So some of it we're kind of, left to figure out on our own of what that means or what that value actually is. But, for the most part, it's, it's starting to come together on how we parse that and do those things. And, but it's those challenges that, and that's why I was really, this is important for us as wireless engineers to start going down this path. The route switch guys are ahead of us. The network guys are ahead of us, and, the server guys are, way ahead of us. So we're kind of one of the last remnants of IT that hasn't embraced this, and we gotta move. But that said, the title's automate or die. I don't know that I actually still believe that. I think there's always going to be a place for traditional wireless engineers. I think that.
Yeah. And I think that's important to understand, is this does not get rid of the job.
And there was a funny post on LinkedIn a few weeks ago where the guy was like, should I learn CCNA or should I learn Python? And I'm like, Python doesn't make you a better engineer. It doesn't make, doesn't change the difficulty level of OSPF or measuring co-channel interference or those things. It just lets you do things at a faster scale, more accurate. And so if you, the quote I use in my class is, to err is human, to err a million times is automation. So if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to do it wrong at unprecedented speed and scale. So.
Well, with that said, we've been talking about Python. Is that the primary programming language you use and recommend?
It's what I use. I write a couple languages, but for networking stuff, it's mostly Python. I don't know that it really matters what language you use. So most of the stuff we're talking about, like APIs and parsing data files, I think you can do it with just about any language. Maybe not COBOL or Fortran. And those probably aren't super practical to do it in. But if you want to write it in PHP or Perl or C++, you can do that. I think Python was really born out of an academic place. And so academia kind of latched onto it. And I think that as a lot of the people came out of academics and into industry, that it kind of gained a lot of traction. But there are other languages. Go is becoming very popular right now, and it's a pretty interesting language. A lot of people are all about Swift. I'm a recovering C# programmer, so you can do it in PowerShell or whatever works for you. And for like the Windows guys, I pick on Windows Server guys a lot, but PowerShell is a big thing in their community. Not quite so much Python. So for them, it's maybe just continue with PowerShell if that's what your industry's doing. But I think for networking folks, we're starting to see that most of the vendors are providing examples in Python. And so I think that makes it a very easy way to make it relevant to what you do.
Yeah. And how should someone get started? So if you're talking to me who just gets a couple of courses here and there, how does one get started to pick up Python and then use that in your day job to try to automate a task or to try to make something more efficient?
So I think there's two pieces to it. One is learning to write Python in the language. So Ryan and I, we really kind of like the Python the hard way book, actually Python 3 the hard way, because it's the hard way. It's not, I think that's misleading. It means it's the way that you put a lot of effort in. And by effort, I mean, you write a lot of little pieces of code. It's not like write this giant game of Yahtzee. It's write a little function that does something. And I like that because it gets you writing code. It gets you thinking about the syntax and how it goes together, in very small ways that you repeat a lot. And repetition builds speed and accuracy. So, that's a really good way to get started. I think there are other pieces. There's lots of ways to learn Python. There's Udemy courses. There's online courses. There's,
they're everywhere. The courses are all over the place.
It's everywhere. The harder piece is how to find stuff that's relevant to you. There's a Kirk Byers runs a Python for network engineers course. It's not so much wireless. I'm hoping there's going to be a Python for wireless engineers course that's going to be a little more mainstream coming. Ryan and I are looking into doing that more, and so hopefully there'll be some opportunities for more people to do that. But I think part of it's learning the language. And then the other part is learning examples. And there are blogs and there are people out there solving problems. The problems between routing and switching and wireless really aren't that different. It's just the things that we care about there is, BGP and OSPF and physical interfaces. And the things we care about in Wi-Fi are slightly different. It's channel and utilization and packets and those types of things. So finding examples, I think, I sat down and I looked at a lot of what I do and I'm like, you could probably do everything that I do in 7 Python libraries. If you knew those 7 Python libraries, you could do everything I have dreamt and built up to this point, which is kind of sad, but,
well, what's something that somebody can actually get started in? Like, what would you recommend somebody who's trying to get in and learn? What's the first thing they can probably try to tackle?
I like Well, it kind of depends on what problem you're trying to solve. I think working with APIs is actually pretty easy. There's a library requests that it makes dealing with, calling an API really easy. The hard part is, do you have a system that has an API? And I bet you do, and you just may not know it.
Yeah. I mean, there's some out there. There's Meraki that has an API. There's Mist.
Meraki, Mist, Mojo, anybody who's in the cloud game. There's even some that you don't think about, like Twilio for SMS messaging. I do some stuff with them. There's all these chat, Slack, Spark, Teams. I've got a million of them installed.
So you can somehow tie like a notification thing. Like if you've hit a certain threshold on your wireless network, you can trigger like a SMS or a Slack message. In that part, you can probably automate yourself, right?
Yeah, I have one that. So I do some malicious things to people who try to steal my home guest internet. And so I have a Spark bot that anytime somebody connects to my home guest network, it sends me a notification and it pulls some information from the firewall about what they're doing. And if I'm not expecting somebody to be at my house, like if I'm at work and there's nobody home, and it's one of the neighbor kids, I can go in and punt them to, I have a I Heart My Neighbors box, which is a proxy that I can do all kinds of fun and malicious things to people. And they accept that because I have it on my terms of service that they have to read to accept to get on. So,
see, there's a good use case of terms and service.
So my chat bot will ping me and say, "Hey, this device," and it pulls some basic information from my Meraki firewall and says, "Hey, this device just joined the guest network." And if I reply back with the heart emoji, it pumps them to my I Heart My Neighbors. And then, it starts randomly doing stuff to them. Right now I have it set up to where, it injects an iframe to their browser, and every credential that it sees go across, it starts putting at the top in that little frame. So they can see all of the credentials that I've captured from them while they've been there. And that usually gets them to leave pretty quickly. So,
yeah, you scare them off really quick. But I think that's a fun way to get started right there, right? It's not like an enterprise thing, but it's a way to get started and figuring out how to use Python, how to use APIs and the capabilities that's there. I mean, it may sound malicious, like the way you describe it, but I mean, it's almost like a security thing, right? So now you can develop something security wise. Hey, we've got this rogue client that's on the network. What can we do to figure out where he is? Who is it? Etc. Like there's just a lot of data you can pull. I mean, you're pulling data off of your firewall and then even injecting data to the user and forcing them off.
Yeah. And for me, I'm doing a change of authorization on that client and saying, I'm going to punt them to a different VLAN, and that VLAN is head-ended by, the I Heart My Neighbors box. And so, those are fun things. Home automation is another one. And I know we're wireless guys. Most of us have some of this, smart home stuff, that we do just because, it's fun. Most of that stuff has APIs around it, and APIs are really easy to start calling and getting data from.
And some of that's trickling into the enterprise. And I see that in education environments. They want to put up, like Wi-Fi connected light bulbs or sensors, and somehow they want to tie that into the wireless network. So if they did have somebody that could automate things, they could do some pretty powerful stuff with those lights or those sensors and try to trigger other actions based on that.
Yeah, like I have one, and I like Raspberry Pis and the little single board computers for some fun stuff just to tinker with. So I've got a Raspberry Pi. It actually is, I do a span to it, and it's listening for, RTP packets. So soft phone or my desk phone or those types of things, because, they won't actually let me call APIs against the phone system at the office, which is fine. But, so I just listen for RTP packets. And when I start seeing RTP packets, I set in my office, I have two lights. They're smart lights, and one of them will turn red when I'm on the phone. so that my wife knows that I'm on the phone if I'm working from home. So.
Oh, I need something like that for the podcast.
Yeah.
Get a recording in progress light and turn it on or off based on if you're on recording a podcast.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. Yeah, I like that.
But playing with stuff is, making it fun and relevant to you is really important, because if you're trying to do stuff that you don't care about, you're not going to keep doing it. If you're not seeing a return on that investment, it's really easy to get frustrated and say, yeah, this isn't worth my time. But I really think, like, looking at where things are coming, we spend a lot of time. I mean, Francois, you learn a bunch of like CLIs for different manufacturers, and you learn iOS switching or Juniper switching CLI to configure stuff to do our jobs. And I think that the mentality is, well, I don't want to be a software developer. And I think the difference is if you look at it, it's like, I'm going to learn a CLI that lets me interact with a whole bunch of stuff and not have to care so much about, whether it's Junos or iOS or Airspace or, I think getting to that point is just like learning another CLI.
And after attending the deep dive, I started to think about everything I could automate in my day job. And this is when it gets interesting, because you realize that, man, so much things can be done faster if I were to just, automate it or write a script about it. It doesn't mean you have the ability to write the script about it. That's my case right now, right? But at least having the use case, the idea, and like you said, the return on investment, that's a start. And if you follow that, and you can learn the language just like how you learn a new CLI language and make it happen. I had another question, more about the environment. In order to start programming, let's say Python, do we need to know about Unix? Do we need to know about Git? Or is it stuff you learn along the way after you get started? Where would you start if someone was brand new to programming, period?
I will say, I think like programming, Linux skills are going to be very important in the future, but, I don't think you have to learn Linux. Git is a tool to make some of the programming stuff easier. It's a software, code repository and versioning system. You don't have to do it. But it can definitely make things easier in the long run. So, those are pieces that probably are, especially if you want to build somebody else's code, you find a code library you want, and you want to pull parts of that in. Their stuff is probably in Git. So, Git is a good one. You can run Python on Windows. You can run Python on Mac. You can run it on Linux. Raspberry Pis are nice because they're cheap and they run Linux, and they all come with Python. So, I think that Windows, my personal opinion, Python on Windows is not as integrated and clean as it is on some of the other platforms. So I tend to not do it if I'm on a Windows host. I'll have a VM, or I'll just have a Pi in the office that I can SSH into and do my Python from. There's also cloud. There's, Python Anywhere has some pretty reasonable stuff. You can do stuff in the free tier in AWS. You can do, DigitalOcean and those types of things. Yeah,
I've been doing it from my iPad, and I'm still reading the book you gave us, the book you talked about learning Python through the hard way. So it's nothing very complicated, but even from the iPad, I was able to install, libraries, and use Python, write my scripting from there, very easily. And the fact that it's on the iPad, it's just easy to carry around if I'm traveling, and I don't have access to my lab or anything like that. If I'm in a train, in a plane, it works. Yeah. So it's pretty useful. I'm not sure if it's going to scale for bigger stuff, but for now it's working well for me.
And people, I always try to tell people, we're not going to, you're probably not going to write you're not going to write the next Salesforce by yourself in Python. You're not going to write a whole NMS in Python. You're probably going to build smaller things and maybe over time you work up to some bigger things, but, I'm constantly going back and reviewing how I do stuff, and, does Vim do everything I need? Do I, on my Mac, it's Atom. Do those things work? And, at some point there may be something better that comes along that you want to switch to. So I never get too invested in any one thing to say, well, I'm going to do it on Pythonista on my iPad forever. There'll be something better in a year, and you may want to switch to that.
Yeah.
You, how long have you been programming, Jake?
Well, that's a complicated story. So I was writing code probably in high school. So that's been a long time. I wrote, mostly C and C++ up into the mid 2000s, where I started, and then, my day job back in the late 2000s, I was writing C#, and then I kind of gave that up when I changed careers, got into, I started working at my current company, and, I gave up programming for a long time because I was focused on learning wireless and networking. And then it came full circle. And so I've probably been writing Python for 3 to 4 years.
Okay. Yeah, that's not bad. What's something that you're actually proud of? Like, is there something, like a project that you've done with Python that's a little bit more complex than what you've described earlier with kind of how to get started? Like, you've been at it for a couple of years now. What's the one thing you've automated that you've thought that you could share with us? That you thought was
probably just process automation at work. Right now we support, Cisco and Meraki, from a deployment perspective, and I just am putting the final touches on deploying Mist through this same thing. And and bringing all that together with the analysis pieces. There's lots of I tend to write small things that are useful. So that's probably one of the bigger things I've written in a long time. And at my old job, I wrote a couple tools that were used for diagnostic purposes that I was pretty proud of. Basically being able to go pull logs from systems and analyze them and determine the root cause, and be able to automate the fix for the lower level support teams. So that's been kind of my, that was another tool I was pretty proud of.
Well, what's so let's say somebody's at their workplace and there isn't anyone who programs. What's what can they tell their managers as to why they should be picking this up? Why this is something that should be looked at?
I think the IT as an industry is moving towards do more with less, right? We're not going to replace that guy that just quit to move someplace else. We're not going to hire more people to support all these other things we're bringing on. And I think it's just one of those things that it helps you scale. And so when you start talking about, I had a customer, I can't name them, but they had 52 sites, that they have to do refresh on. And he's like, even if I do one a week, that's the entire year. He's like, that's ridiculous. I can't, I can't do that. And he's like, that'll take us the whole year to get just this refresh project done. And so being able to say, hey, well, let's automate this. Let's go and simplify and do these things and help speed that up. It's no longer a year, it's a month. And now I've given this guy 11 months of 11 months of stuff that he can get done that he wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So, from my perspective, if you went to your boss and said, I can give you 11 months extra manpower this year, what would you say? Most of us, I would hope to say yes.
Yeah. He could put you on other jobs, other clients.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Well, that's awesome. And the book that you had given out to your course, at the WLPC was the Learn Python 3 the Hard Way. Yep. I think I'm going to pick myself a copy on Amazon and get started with that. I've had a couple courses, but sometimes it's just hard for me to sit through a video and watch somebody do it. It's more of getting on the actual terminal and doing something.
The other piece is I just started reading one. I'm going to pull it up on Amazon real quick. Let me find it here. It's Network Programmability and Automation, which is brand new. It's an O'Reilly book, but it's written by a couple people known to the Twitter network community: Jason Edelman, Scott Lowe, and Matt Oswalt. All three really smart guys that are very active in the programming and automation for network folks. That's what I'm reading right now. And if you're looking for finding ways to make it relevant to what you do, I think they do a terrific job of presenting some use cases and things that will kind of get your creative juices flowing of how to use Python. So,
and I think it's important to say that it's not only Python, right? You could, like, if I'm thinking about the Ekahau custom report template, that saves us a lot of time too, and it's also automation, right?
Yeah, and we leverage that in our stuff. There are custom templates that we have that do specific tasks, and some of it is like I bypass some of that. Don't tell the Ekahau guys that I bypass some of the custom reporting with my own because there are limitations in some of the reporting, and that's okay. But there are specific things I want to do. Specifically, I want output in other formats like JSON or CSV that I can't get in a Word doc. So sometimes I bypass their reports specifically in the sake of time or the sake of the format I need it to come out in. And so, but yeah, those custom reports are a great way to kind of look at, I'm automating some of the manual, document creation process. So it's not just Python. I had a coworker who was like, he was taking a Python course and he was trying to figure out how to do something. And I showed him and he's like, great. And I'm like, do you want the good news or the bad news? And he's like, what's the bad news? I'm like, Ansible already does this out of the box. And he was like, damn it. He's like, so why do I need Python? And I'm like, well, in this case, you didn't. But, it's not to say that that's that it does everything, but it was like, oh, well, there's already something out there that you can just go download, install, and it does this. So, the danger of some of this is when your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Sometimes you get into this, I'm going to automate it in Python because I can. And sometimes you do have to take a step back and look at things from a holistic perspective of what should I do? How should these pieces fit together? And so, Python is one piece of that, other automation frameworks. Right now I'm spending time learning Ansible and I'm looking at, now I'm going to forget the name, Stackstorm, as an automation framework for integrating with other stuff that I've done. So, you start down this path of, I'm going to automate this piece. And then after you have a bunch of pieces, sometimes it's like, I got to put the pieces together into something bigger. And so I'm constantly looking at what I'm doing. Does that fit into a larger holistic of picture of what I should be doing? And then changing as needed. It's not, the stuff changes pretty quick. So, being able to adapt and that kind of stuff is important.
Francois, did you have another use case you wanted to share?
Yeah, I actually have a couple of stuff I have in mind. So I recently worked on the EAP-SIM project. Was very interesting. And in the way the protocol works, at one point you have to generate triplets of numbers used for the authentication. And this is used, this is done through an algorithm named comp128. And I wanted to do it on my own, so I found a script, a Python script online. And so I downloaded this script, and then I started from there. It didn't do exactly what I wanted to do, but with the the little knowledge I had, I could modify the script, study whatever was in the script, modify the script the way I wanted it, and automate some of the work of the testing I needed to get done. Turned out that I eventually didn't use my script at the end because the new free Vegetation server does this for you. but just going through the process of downloading a script from the internet, reading, understanding what it does. Some of the stuff I've never seen before. I was just researching it online, and then modifying the script to make it your own and make it do whatever you want to do. I think it was a pretty cool use case for like a beginner like me. I'm not really new to programming because I went to engineering school, and we did a lot of programming. I just didn't like it at the time. But whenever programming, now, whenever it's relevant to my job, or if it has anything Wi-Fi related, if it's Wi-Fi related, I like it for some reason, right? But yeah, so I have a good knowledge of how, the Unix and install programs and download stuff and run, compile and run and all of that. So this part, I kind of have it covered. I still, Google a few things to know how to delete a line on VI, but, at least I know how to get around. Another use case I'm thinking about is, sometimes I do AP on a stick site surveys, and I do it with different APs from different vendors. And when it comes to, getting ready for the site survey, you want to configure your AP, making sure it's ready for the job for the next day. And for some reason, because I don't do it on a, day-to-day basis, it always takes me a long time to get it done. I have to make sure I have the right version and all of that. And it just takes too much time for me. So I'm thinking maybe I could create a script that would just do it for me, configure the AP for me. Whether it's a, Cisco AP, Aruba AP, whatever. So that's something I have in the back of my head. Maybe.
Yeah, that sounds doable.
Yeah. And this is something we can also share with the community, right? When you're done, you can just put it on your GitHub and then have people downloading it and making it better. And that's, we don't really have much available right now, for the Wi-Fi community. Jake has done a lot of stuff, but, I'm sure he's, under his employer, some of his employer restrictions.
Yeah. And I'm hoping to get it done this weekend. So hopefully by the time this comes out, it'll be out. But, one of the big asks was a CSV export for Ekahau. So I have one 99% done. I do it for some stuff at work, but I have to rewrite it that's not using the same code. So I'm hoping to have that published for everybody so they can grab it and say, that's export awesome. All my data from an Ekahau document. And
that would be nice.
Import the Jake's library.
Yep. So I'm hoping we'll have, but I'm hoping that as this stuff grows and matures and more people start seeing the value in this, that we'll see more and more interesting tools coming out of it. I did find it interesting that the crack vulnerability, a lot of the stuff that they did with the proof of concept was built around Python and the Scapy library and some of that stuff. You could test it
in your lab too. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And also, I think it's going to help us getting more information outside the out of the device, the client device. When we do our analysis, we have a lot of data from our APs and controllers. With the new sensors, we're starting to get more of the client size overview of the network. But if we can, get logs out of our production client devices, it might help us to do troubleshooting tasks.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. The challenge with the iPhone log has always been getting it off. But Eric showed us the unified logging stuff, which I'd not been exposed to, but there's some unified logging stuff that came to iOS. And the cool part is that the unified logging stuff, you can pull the logs off a variety of ways, including AirDrop. And so it was like, I can just AirDrop the log from my phone to myself. That's pretty awesome. Which takes some of that pain of having to, let me go find an iTunes laptop and go plug it into. So
yeah, that's the one thing I did not want to do.
and so that piece, I think as time goes by, I think these things are getting better, and it does take time for the industry to get there. But and me personally, it's one of those, that's the first question I always ask. Poor Blake, he released the RSSI compared his new website for doing some device RSSI comparisons. And the first thing I asked was, well, does it have an API? And he's like, oh, I'll add it to the list. So,
well, awesome. Well, I know you got somewhere else to go, and we appreciate that you were able to join us on the show and talk about programming, getting started with Python, and actually talking about some of the use cases that you're doing. We wanted to let people know, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at jsnyder81, and I just launched my new blog and YouTube channel, which is 2DS from DS. So if you're on YouTube, search for 2DS from DS or 2dsfromds.com. All spelled out, no numbers. But yeah, you can find me at both those places. And probably the best, and I'm also in most of the Wi-Fi community Slacks, so including the Clear to Send one. So
awesome. Well, greatly appreciate it. And like Jake said, check out his YouTube channel. It's a really cool concept, I think. As you drive to and from work, you record video and talk about some Wi-Fi topics. And I thought it was a great idea that you started that.
Yeah, podcasting, I'm sure you guys know the challenges of audio, so I'm learning some hard lessons right now.
You'll figure it out. It's taken us a while to figure it out, and we're still learning. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for having me on.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you guys.